All right, for those of us who are just kind of those of us who are just starting to watch the view, we're just getting this started. We'll have a couple people be joining in, so if you could hang out just a couple minutes while everyone gets logged in. All right, and for those of us that are just joining, there's a bit of a latency. It could be up to about 30 seconds by the time I see your questions or comments come in. But I'll try to watch the comments as we go along here. But if you have any particular topics that you want or questions that you want to cover, we had a couple people that already had posed a couple of questions. But if you wanted to go into the comments area, we can go ahead and start leaving some comments, and we'll get started in just a couple minutes, and we'll make sure everyone can get logged in. So I see some people kind of getting logged in. If you want to post your comments, all right, so we have some more people logging in. For those people who are just kind of logging in, there's a bit of a latency when using the Google Hangout, so it could be up to 30 seconds by the time I speak to you to when you hear it. But if you have topics that you want covered, please feel free to go ahead and type them in the comments field. We'll kind of get started here in a couple minutes. We'll let some more people get logged in. And for those of us that this will be available online or offline on this YouTube channel at youtube.com/ClubCubase for people that want to watch it afterwards as well. All right, we'll wait a few more minutes to get started. If you guys want to go into the comments area and just say hi and maybe do a quick introduction if you want. Okay, so I see Avi's question, so we'll go over that about comping MIDI parts. And we'll let some more people get logged in. If you have any other topics that you want covered, please feel free to kind of drop them in the comments area. And I just want to make sure you guys can hear me okay on the microphone. Make sure I'm not distorting or sending too much level. If you guys could just type in some comments if the levels sound okay for the voice. Again, we'll just get started. Just saw Greg's comments. If you could go ahead and maybe just refresh me. I got a number of different comments, including VST system link, which we'll take a quick look at, and setting up large templates, and we have a MIDI comping question and about using headphones. So if you want to just retype your question again, we'll make sure that I got the questions so we can go through it. All right, again, we'll just wait a couple more minutes for people to get logged in. Thanks for letting me know it sounds okay, Greg. All right, so again, we'll just wait a couple more minutes for people to get logged in, and we'll get started in about 2 or 3 minutes. Good to see you on the Google Hangout, Bill Jacoby. You'll have to come down, and we'll have to do a band reunion sometime. Okay, so we'll go over the track versions, Greg, and one of the things that you could do if you have all the parts in a folder track, they don't necessarily need to be highlighted, but we'll go over the track versions as well. Good to see you online, Sir Robert. All right, we'll give one more minute and we'll get started. And as we kind of go through this, if you have questions, you could just kind of please type them in the comments area. And then we'll try to address them. Again, there's going to be a delay from when I speak. It could be up to about 30 seconds at times to when you actually hear it on your end. So if I'm kind of missing something, or if you need a clarification, just kind of I'll try to monitor in the comments field as we go along so that it can make sense. Okay, Greg, I see some of your other questions coming in, so we'll go through those. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started, and as people come on, we'll just feel free to kind of ask your questions. All right, so let's talk about MIDI comping. I haven't done this in a long time. I believe the comp tool works, so we'll take a quick look at it. So if I want to come here to a new project, and I'll start off with an empty project right here, and I'll just choose my folder. We'll add a MIDI track, and I'll just go ahead and add an instrument track here, and let's do one for, we'll add, let's say, a Halion Sonic SE, and we'll add the track. All right, so when we want to do some of the functions here, let's say if I want to do a quick comp recording. If you're not familiar with the concept of like a comp recording, what this is going to allow you to do is to have multiple takes. And then as we have these takes, we can compile kind of the different and best parts of them. So if I want to record some MIDI information, one of the clever things that you could do inside of Cubase is to actually come here, and if you right click on the transport bar, you can have a virtual keyboard. And I'm going to put this into a cycle record by enabling this icon right here in the transport bar. And then I'm just going to go ahead, make sure that this track is record enabled. And then if I wanted to, we'll just go ahead and play a particular track here. So now when I record, this will actually transmit MIDI information without having to have a physical MIDI keyboard hooked up. So I'll go ahead and we'll record. And it's going to cycle. All right, so if I come here, let me see, we can now open up your lane view right here. So if I wanted to select different parts of different takes, so what I could do now is to come here and select the comp tool. I believe this will work on MIDI tracks. Now, if you see that the resolution doesn't seem very fine, like if it's only snapping to particular areas, what you could actually do is come right over here and make sure that the snap value is disabled. And then once this is disabled, right here, this icon, and you could also do this by hitting the letter J on the computer keyboard, this will allow you to not be bound by any particular snapping to musical or to seconds in your time format. So you can actually pick and choose your different areas here. Now, if you wanted to take all of those different parts, we can now collapse the lane view, and we can now see my different takes here. So you may have to expand this icon right here, just to make sure that the lane view is open. And once the lane view is open, select the comp tool, and as you would select the comp tool here, we can now pick and choose our different areas. And as you do this, it'll automatically deselect areas right there. And if you want to zoom in, you could do that, and now all those parts can be together. Now, if you wanted to make a copy of that track, you can just simply come here, hold down, I believe it's just your Alt key if you want to select all the events, and then hold down your Alt key and you could drag and you can make a copy of that particular part right there. So very easy, kind of the same paradigm that we have for comping audio performances, we can have for comping different MIDI parts as well. If you have any more questions on that, please kind of go ahead and type in questions. Now, we also had a question on track versions, and it's when selecting a new version, is it only the highlighted tracks? Is that correct? So we'll go ahead and open up a quick project showing some of the track versions. And we could think of the track versions as being more of a kind of a super type of comping that's really applicable for multi-track recordings. So we'll go ahead and open up this project. Okay, so with track versions, what I have this set up for is to actually pass 16 tracks of audio from Groove Agent SE4 as audio tracks right here. So one of the easy things to do that I like to do when doing a large multi-track session is to actually select all the tracks and to place them into their own folder tracks. I right click here and I say let's move selected tracks to new folder. So as I move the selected tracks to new folder, this would give me the ability, instead of arming each of the tracks individually for record or for monitoring, to actually just select the entire folder, and at this point we can monitor or arm all of the tracks for record directly there. Now as we work with this, one of the other things that we could do is, if I wanted to record audio, so when I'm just using this to generate audio, we're going to pass the audio. So I've routed the drum pads here to separate outputs, and those outputs as or to groups as inputs here. So I'm just going to now trigger this pattern here. I'll turn this down just a little bit, and then I want to record. Say we'll do 8 bars of this. Now, as one of the things that we want to use the group folder for is a concept of group editing. So once I have the folder tracks rather than a group track, the folder track, I could enable this icon here for group editing. And I believe the keyboard shortcut is I thought it was Control K, but I could be mistaken. But you could just go to your group editing icon directly here. And now, if I wanted to do another recording, let's say I'll do this. What I could do now is, instead of having to select all of the tracks and to select a new track version, once the group editing is enabled, this would automatically carry over for all of the tracks. But if my group editing was disabled and I have this track selected and I say new version, it would only do that one single track. So the group editing would allow you to work with everything on one, so everything can be grouped together so that you don't have to do it one by one by one. At times you may want to actually just disable one particular track and then do your take that way. But with the group editing, what that's going to allow you to do is to not have to select all 16 tracks or 24 tracks in your project and to select a new track version. So you could do it with the group editing off if they're all manually selected, or if you don't want to do that, for ease of use, use the group editing function. All right, so next question we have will be on editing in Very Audio. So let's go ahead and we'll just open up a quick project with that. All right, so I see some more of the, while this is loading up, see some more questions coming in about the pencil tool, control room, adjusting events. All right, so let's take a quick look at using some of the Very Audio. If you're not quite familiar with the Very Audio, it's really pretty incredible tool for editing vocals. So if you notice that vocals might be slightly out of tune, you can come over here into the sample editor and then select Vary Audio. So once you have double clicking the sample editor, if we look at a particular part here, this will allow you to come right over here, and you could see the part in more detail. Now, one of the great things you could do is having the Vary Audio editor. And as you kind of work here, you can now see your particular vocals. It'll do a quick analysis of your entire vocal file, and as you wanted to edit it, you can see all the parts here as if they were MIDI parts. So we'll just come right here back to the beginning. So rewind here just a little bit. So this is our lead vocal, and after it does its analysis, we're able to just kind of come right over here and see all of our parts. Now, one of the things that can really help is kind of doing some of the basic vocal editing that you're able to do. Let me just set my locators here a little more appropriately. Now, one great trick if you want to set locators around a particular event is to select that event and hit the letter P, and that will automatically set the left and right locators around that particular part. Now, something else that's really handy with the Vary Audio editor is if we have, let's say, a piano and a voice here. So let's say we start off like this. I could actually just really quickly do an analysis. I'm going to right click, and then we'll go to the chord track. And as I go to the chord track, I could actually say make chords. And what that's going to do, it's going to do an analysis of the MIDI piano part here, and it's going to lay it out as a chord track directly on top here. So if we wanted to look in, we can see that we're in the key of G, and we see the first chord is G major, going to a D with the F sharp in the bass, to an E minor 7th, to G sus4. Now, once I come here into my Vary Audio, we get a new tool that allows you to not only choose the colors automatically or by the event colors or change the colors by pitch, but by actually coming here and choosing the chord track. So we see that I have like a red note, a green note, and a blue note. The green note will allow you to actually see which notes are within the scale or within the chord of the actual piano part that's been determined. Blue notes will be within the scale, and red notes will be out of key and out of scale. So if I wanted to listen to this example here, you stare at the ground. Now if I wanted to move this note here, we can see that now it's a red note. This could be out of key. You stare at the ground. And if I wanted to, so we could hear, obviously hear harmonically, that doesn't make a lot of sense. But now if I come here, we can also move it to a particular green note. You stare at the ground, not a sound. Tell me why. So now sometimes you may run into different transitions between the notes and kind of this segment. So sometimes the very beginning of a note you may hear just like the little breath. You stare. So what you can do to kind of tame these transitions is actually just kind of coming here just to the very corners. So if I wanted to come here, we can actually just to the corner, just kind of select that particular, and I could use that as kind of like an anchor point. So if I wanted to just change the pitch and do something horrendously musical, amusical, you could do stuff like that. Or you could also double click, and that would create an anchor point. So I've created an anchor point right here, and now I could just come right there and just choose to to anchor from that one particular area. Now, if you find the pitch to have a little too much vibrato, that, let's say, it could be a little Broadway-esque, and perhaps that's not the intended vocal stylings, is you could actually come here and just choose to straighten the pitch. So that can also kind of help with particular transitions between notes. Now, sometimes you could also go to what's called a segment mode. And once you're in segment mode, I can now come here, and if I just go to the bottom, you'll see like a little scissors tool come up here when I go to the bottom of a note. And then this way I can cut that note. And then I could treat this note once I go back into my pitch and warp mode here. And I could switch those modes just by hitting my tab key on my computer keyboard. So now I could adjust just this transitions just on that one particular beginning of the note or just the end of the note without having really bad transitions between different notes. So those are some really handy ways of being able to use the Very Audio and be able to kind of tame the transitions and the segment mode. So again, using kind of the combination of segment modes and pitch and warp can make a real big difference with that. Now, the next question we have is about the ability of saving presets. So let's go ahead and see how we could save different presets for particular files. So with Cubase, you have a number of presets that come with a program, and this is something that a lot of people perhaps miss out on. So when I actually wanted to right-click and add an audio track, if you actually come here, you could actually choose to, if you wanted to right-click, you could say Load Track Preset. So if I wanted to load up a track preset, I could come here, and I'm going to delete kind of my search field. I could say I'm looking for a guitar sound, an electric guitar, and I could say I want a 1960s blues guitar. And as I add this, let's see if it added a track. Okay. So now what it's done is it's actually gone through, and we could actually come here, and if we wanted to, so that would load up like all of my presets for this very particular guitar track. Now I could also choose to add a track using the track preset. So if I say I wanted a different type of guitar, so what I did previously, we loaded a preset on an existing track, but now I could say I wanted a vocal. And then you'll have different characteristics. So if I wanted to, I could say I want, let's say, a female ballad vocal. So now when I add the track, we can open this track up, and it's going to add not only our compressor, but also our EQ settings perfectly dialed in. Now, if I have modified this, let's say I adjusted to EQ, and I wanted to add some another plugin here. Let's say if I wanted to add just a little bit of, say, a noise gate, I could come here to my dynamics, and we'll say let's add a gate. And now once this is set up here, I can now save this track preset. And then I'm going to give it a name, and we'll call it Google Hangout. Then I'll hit OK. And now when I want to go back and use those same settings, I'll remove this track. And it's add track. using the track preset. And you could actually just kind of type right here. And sometimes you may have to just remove the fields. And right now I see my Google Hangout preset. And then when I open that up, we can see that it can change the noise gate that I added, the compressor, and my EQ changes. Now, if you don't see some of the track presets, one of the things that you might want to do is to make sure when you go into Media Bay that when you come here, you can actually see user content. So make sure that this is checked in the Media Bay. So at this point now, if I said, okay, let's look for all media types, and then if I choose to rescan this disk, and I may not have said it, but at this point, once you come right here, you can, once you go to add your track presets, and something that I do a lot when I work with this is always kind of save, if I know it's, you know, coming from my studio, you may call it AAA or whatever. So these will just kind of show up, and you could just search by name right there. So with track presets, if you don't see yours listed, just try doing a rescan of your media bay, or just right click here so you can add track, and then you could just simply add the track using the track preset or load the track preset, either way. And make sure also, it could be that sometimes people will have your different fields activated. So if you have filters set up, you might have a filter condition that the track preset wasn't part of. So you can click right here to just reset the filters, and then just simply add your Google Hangout preset just like that. All right, so we had a question about in the control room, can I have separate effects for the cue mixes? So this is an area, the control room, if you're not super hip to it, can be a great place for setting up headphone mixes. So we'll talk about, we'll show you real quickly how to set up like a headphone mix for like a typical band project. And when you're dealing with headphone mixes, people often want what's called a more me headphone mix. So the singer wants to hear more of themselves, as does the vocalist, as does the bass player, the guitarist. It's, you know, each musician wants to hear more of themselves in the headphones, so they're kind of more comfortable with doing the mixes. So when we come here, let's say if we have an ensemble here, and I'll just make sure this is turned down just a little bit. So let's say in this example I have vocals, drums, guitars, and bass. Now, to set up a cue mix, we could do it quite easily from the mix console. And to open the mix console, you can go to Devices, and then you can go to your mix console, or just by hitting F3. So if you want to go to your mix console, we can now come here, and then in the rack section, make sure that you have cue sends activated. So once we click here on the cues, we can see that we have our vocal cue mix, our guitars, bass, and drums. And these are just routed out to various outputs on our audio interface. So if I wanted to go to my VST connections, I could go to my studio tab, and then here I could have various inputs and outputs of my audio interface connected for external inputs, a talkback microphone, or I could have outputs connected for my cue mixes. So once I have those defined, I can now come here, and let's kind of zoom here. And then one of the great things you could do now is just select on a cue mix here and right click. And then you could see this little all cues from selected mixer. So the first thing I want to do is to make sure that the cue sends are actually enabled. So once I'm going to activate all of the cue mixes, and the one thing you want to do, which I just didn't do, is to select all of the tracks in your project. And then it's always good, it might be good also to add to enable the quick link, which you can do by holding down Shift plus Alt, or just turning this icon on right here. So we're going to now activate all the cue sends, and since all the channels are selected now, they'll all be activated. And I want, first off, when we do a More Me headphone mix, we want to take the mix that's going directly here on our console, and we want to be able to spread that out across, but all the different headphone mixes. So what I want to do now is to go to all cue mixes, and I say I want to use the current mix levels. So what this is going to do is going to mimic my fader positions right here, and it's going to spread these across each of the cue mixes right here. So this will take just a minute in a large project. And I also want to, in all my cue mixes, use my current pan settings. So right now at this point, everyone is kind of hearing the same thing that I'm hearing in the control room. But now if I want to give the drummer more drums in their headphone mix, I just come down here. I can see that my fourth headphone mix is drums. So what I want to do is to just come right here, and I'm going to add more drums to the drums headphone mix. We'll come here, and let's say now I just want to do the bass, and we'll add more bass to the bass player's headphone mix. And we'll go to the guitars. And we'll add more guitars into the guitar headphone mix. So within a control room, I could now click right here, and I could switch between my mix, what I hear, to what the drummer would hear, to what the bass player would hear, to what the guitar player would hear, versus the mix. Now, something that's very important is when dealing with cue mixes, and these could be really critical for people to work with, is, to capturing a great performance, is the ability to, maybe not everyone wants to hear the click track. So now you could actually come here and you can say the guitars, bass, and drums want to hear the click track, but the singer does not want to hear the click track. And often you may have people that want to hear cue mixes in or effects in their cue mix, like the question had asked. And now if we come here to our setup, we can now just click right here, and I can now adjust and add different plugins on that particular cue mix. So if I want to add an amp, or if I wanted to go to the vocals and give them a courtesy reverb, I can now just kind of come right over here. So just by clicking from the Mixer tab to the Setup tab, you can now see where you can add different effects directly right there for the different cue mixes. So it makes it really easy to set up your headphone mixes, and unlike many other third-party systems, when you actually set up a headphone mix, it's actually saved within the project in Cubase, so you can call it up perfectly every single time. And really don't underestimate kind of the value of a good cue mix, because often if you wonder why a bass player or drummer aren't quite locking in on a session, It could be a simple thing of, the bass player is not hearing what he needs to hear in his headphones. And you also see this with vocals as well, where many times a vocalist won't be able to sing in tune, or their pitch will actually change pretty significantly. All right, I'm kind of monitoring this, and I see it looks like we went offline for a second. All right, I think we're back. But you'll see that sometimes, the singer's pitch can really be affected by the cue mix. So really, really important thing to do, and it's really handled very well inside of the Cubase mixer. All right, so we'll move on, and let's take a look at next question. All right, so we had a question about doing volume control using the pencil tool. Let me just read through the question here. All right, so we had a quick question about like doing some clip gain. So let me just open up a quick project to show this a little better. And we'll just switch back to this project. Sorry, I keep hitting the microphone with my headphones. I'm sure that's annoying. Sorry. All right, so there's many different approaches to doing audio gain, especially on something like a vocal or any audio part directly within Cubase. Now, one of the things that there's three basic ways of doing it. One could be handled directly from the fader. So if I have this selected here, I could adjust the fader, and this is tied directly into automation, which we'll look at in just a minute. Now, if I have the entire vocal area here and it's selected, I can now have my clip gain just like this. So if I just hold the mouse down, I can now just adjust this, and you can see how much gain is being kind of added there within the dialogue. And you could also adjust the volume of the clip right here from the info line. So you get up to an additional 24 dB of gain. So that's very handy. Now, a lot of people will use a variation on this tool to, when you come here, to actually now, if you wanted to just take a particular word, I could now just take this one phrase and just take that clip gain right there and adjust the volume just on that particular clip. Now, sometimes you may have like a breath or something like that, or maybe like a little bit of a lip smack here. So what you could do sometimes before leading up to the vocal, if you select that range, you can just kind of minimize that. And often if you like just put silence in there, it may sound just a little bit out of context because there isn't a traditional noise floor. So when I come here, that's a very handy way of doing clip gain. So some people, and I see this with some of my friends in Austin would do this, where they would almost would zoom in, and they would cut at the bar with the scissors tool, and then hold down the Alt or Option key, and then click on the scissors tool again, and then every measure can be cut. And this way they could just kind of very easily take different phrases here and adjust the gain accordingly. So if you want to come here, you could just say, okay, let's just take that gain, increase, decrease that gain. Now, another tool that could be used for doing this is also the pencil tool. So if I just wanted to draw in event tools here, I can now, just with my pencil tool, just draw in volume changes. And if you wanted a value just to be to the left, you can now just kind of come right there and select. And these are kind of very similar to a concept that we had in Cubase VST from, going back, I believe, to almost Atari days, called dynamic events, of being able to have your control here. Now, one of the reasons that we have both the clip-based gain and the pencil gain is that this will actually kind of adjust the gain before it hits the channel in the mixer. So this way you could actually kind of regulate a lot of the volume changes right here. Now, if we simply cut a part and using the split tool, once I have a part selected, I could then, if I wanted to, conversely just do fade ins and fade outs. We could do that, and that works well again if you wanted to actually take, chop up each measure if you want to have seamless crossfades. Now, something else that's really handy, once you have two events that are overlapping, let's say if we had a really tight punch in, we can now come right here, and let's say if I needed to crossfade these two elements, and let's say we zoom in and we see that these elements are overlapping, and the elements to do a crossfade need to overlap, otherwise there's nothing for it to really crossfade. So once you have two elements here, two clips that are overlapping, you can simply hit the X key. And then once you have the X key, that will do a crossfade so that this first clip will fade out as the next one fades in. And if you wanted to edit the crossfade, you could double click here, and you could have parallel inputs and out, or fade ins and fade outs, or you could just come here, and if you uncheck equal gain, you could set up various presets for your fade ins. So if you want a sinusoid fade out but a logarithmic fade in, you can have that all set up as well. Now, so we could do these types of volume control beforehand, but if I wanted to actually have, like in the mixer here, if we click in the lower left-hand corner, we could open up the automation lane. And once we open up the automation lane here, this will be after the signal flow of the dynamic. So if you wanted to kind of regulate the volume levels and kind of use a compressor just to kind of get it in that sweet spot before affecting the actual volume changes, you could do that. So you could actually kind of do a lot of pre-editing to kind of get best use of the compressor, so you're not using one compressor or multiple compressors to achieve different things. So this will be tied directly into our automation. So as we play here and we see this, we can see the faders move accordingly. Now, to edit automation, there's some really handy shortcuts that a lot of people miss. One is you could actually just kind of select your automation here, and then from the info line, if you liked it and you wanted all, you like that curve, you want it all be down, softer, or louder, you could do that. But you could also just come here, and once you have a range selected, if I wanted to kind of adjust the tail end or the beginning of the clip, or if I wanted to come here, we could also kind of just scale the clip, or coming to the center, I could compress. So if I wanted more dynamic changes or fewer dynamic changes, we could just kind of come right there. So I think the original question was with the pencil tool. If you wanted to kind of come right here to the draw tool, you could just kind of set your before and after points. So you may want to, if you wanted to just kind of dip one particular phrase, almost like a ducker, you can easily achieve that just like that. And I'll go back and reread the question just to make sure I kind of addressed the point. And I think with the original question from Greg, if you click at the very top, that is kind of the master. That is the top of the range. But if you wanted to, again, just kind of select, let's say if you need to get more additional gain, just come here. And even if you're at the top with the pencil tool, you can still get more gain by using the clip handles here. Here, let me just adjust this. So if you want more gain, just again select here, use the center handle, and be able to adjust that. And if you need more volume gain, go to the info line, and you get an additional 24 dB gain, which probably will be enough in most circumstances. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and look at some further questions. All right, so tying into this theme, we had a question about adjusting our clip gains with a keyboard shortcut. Let's take a quick look, see if we can do that. I'm not sure. So let's say I set this to 0 here. And then as I wanted to come here, let's check your key commands. Now, Cubase, I think it's about 1,500 different keyboard, different functions are addressable through keyboard shortcuts. And one of the great things is if you're just kind of looking, you can come here. Okay, so we have an increment event volume. Now, when we're setting up a keyboard shortcut, we'll see if this one works. I believe it will, so we'll give it a try. You could come here, and then you could assign your own keyboard shortcuts. But the problem is there's so many keyboard shortcuts within a program that sometimes it could be hard to figure out. So if you come here, you could actually type in a key. I like to use like Alt-Control and then a function, because sometimes those aren't safe. So I'm just going to hit Alt-Control-G, and this isn't assigned to anything. If it was assigned to something, like if I just typed in Control-G, we would see that this would assign grouping. So a lot of times if you're looking to make your own keyboard shortcuts, we'll try Alt-Control plus another key that you want. So I'll come here, we'll see if this works. Yep, so you can see I'm just using Alt-Control-G for gain, and that's increasing it right there. So select it, I'm going to hit Alt-Control-G, and then you could adjust the gain. So really handy with being able to set up your own key commands. And if once you, after a while, you get to be very much a power user using different keyboard shortcuts. And they can really speed up your workflow. I see a lot of people with very extensive control surfaces, and often it's they're like, oh, I can hit this button and it does this, I hit this button it does that. And if you take time to kind of really learn your keyboard shortcuts, I find that my computer keyboard really functions as a great controller in some for a lot of tasks. And again, so if you come here, you could search for your key commands right here. And as you search for your key commands, just kind of, you could type in like, okay, I want to go to listen bus. You just type in listen and then search. And then you can just simply find that function with the search function. Now, something else that a lot of people miss with the key commands will be the ability to make macros. So let's say if I wanted to come over here, and if I wanted to actually execute if I find myself doing the same type of edit, like, that's 5 or 6 steps repeatedly over time, what you could actually do is come here and you could just add a macro. So if I wanted to make a new macro, I could say, I want to come here. We're going to give it a new macro. And let's say I want to be able to select all the files, set the left and right locator around those files, and do an export audio mixdown. So instead of doing those three things all the time, what I'm going to do is actually create a mixdown, and I'll just call this or a macro for my mixdown. I'm going to give it a name, and then I want to add command. And what I want to do is I'll just delete this command. I'm going to find my select all, and again, you could just do the search function. Okay, and then I want to add that command, and then the next command I want to add is locators to selection. Search for that. Add command. So within my, let me just do my select all again. Sorry. Okay, locators to selection. Add command. And now I want to go to export audio. And I see the export audio mixdown. We'll add command. Okay, so now if I wanted to come here and trigger that macro, let's say if I have my locators set like this, I can now go to my edit and I'll see my macros here. So I'll say mixdown. So now instead of doing those 3 or 4 tasks or 7 tasks repeatedly over and over and over again, we have the capability to just come right there and really optimize that by setting up your own keyboard shortcuts. And also, if you're switching from other programs, one of the things that we would see a lot is people wanting presets from other programs. So you could actually come here, and for other digital audio workstations, if you're kind of have muscle memory for the keyboard shortcuts, you can have the ability of actually loading those in. Or if you have someone else that's used to other programs, they could just simply load in those key commands and function exactly how they want inside of Cubase. All right, we'll see if we have, let me go back and see if I missed any questions that people had. All right, just to reiterate, Greg had asked a question about, should you just use the automation track or using the volume control? It really is going to make a difference, if you want to have the volume control before using a Dynamics plugin. So they'll kind of get you the same result in the end if you're not using Dynamics, but sometimes it's really easy just to kind of do it on the part. But it's really your choice if you want to use the automation lanes, which will be post Dynamics, or the tool, or using the clip gain pre Dynamics. All right, so Tony had asked about kind of getting rid of unused audio files within a project. So let's say if I want to go back to a project, I think maybe here I have some audio files within this project that I could get rid of. All right, so one of the things is I see a lot of people missing out on is going to be file management. So, and I've seen many top producers and engineers have an entire file, entire folder that's like every audio file that they've ever recorded. So when you kind of start off with your file management, you can come here, and when you go to New Project, you can now come here, and by default in Cubase, you'll have the Steinberg hub. And this could be, by default, it uses what's called the use default location. This will get stored within your My Documents folder or your Documents folder. I like to have it prompt me for a file location. So when I come here, once I do that, I'm going to hit continue. And then as I do this, it's going to ask me to define an audio file to set the project folder. And this is where all the audio files will actually be placed within that folder. So it's really, really important. Try to, a really great methodology is to have one folder per song. And this will contain all the files that you would need to open up that folder with all the image files for the waveforms, all the audio files, the MIDI information, etc. And this way you just move one folder and all the subfolders will automatically be carried over. Now, if you've done a lot of edits and you're like, okay, we did a lot of takes and maybe you want to get rid of some particular takes, you can now come here. Let me just disable my group editing. And let's say as I do this, I don't want to use those files. So if you go into your media menu, you can go to your pool folder. And what's really kind of interesting about this is we can now see this will be showing you all of your files within the pool, all the files that have been recorded into this particular project. Now there's some functions you could do just by right-clicking here, and one of them would be to remove unused media. So if I come here, I could move to trash or remove from the pool. So the pool is going to keep a reference of every audio file that's been involved with that project. It doesn't matter if it was a loop that was dragged into a completely different folder. The reference to that audio file is going to be directly inside of the pool. So if I wanted to move it to the trash, I can now move those folders to the trash. So those files will now be placed in the trash. Or I could just choose to right-click and remove unused media, and I could just remove it from the pool, but keep it available on the hard drive in case I need that file for some unknown reason. At this point, once I have the files in my trash, I can now come right over here, and you could choose to empty the trash right above there. And that would get rid of all the files. So I could, again, it prompts me whether you want to remove it from the pool or to erase it from the disk itself. So now the files are completely erased. Now sometimes people forget to save this. Now this pool will actually be part of the project. And a pool can also be saved independently if you export it as a library file. So if you wanted to export the pool, you could do that as its own library file, but you could just simply come here and then those will show you all the files that are being used. Now, sometimes if people are importing audio files or drum loops from other folders on your system, and maybe they're going into different folders, and if you kind of slide over the pool, you could actually see the path over here. And if you want, we could just kind of move that. So you could see, if you're like, oh, where is this file actually at? Here you have the path heading. So this will show you the file location on your computer. So now, if you had files that were in different locations, you could just come right here and actually choose conform files. And that will then move all the files directly into the project folder that was defined when we went to the original setting up our location when we did our new project. Now, something else that a lot of people miss, if we have a folder track, and I do this a lot, set it up for live people like this, and we have all of the routing set up, I could actually duplicate that track. And let's say I was doing a live recording, and it's always inevitable that someone wants to walk away with a portable hard drive with all the files on it right after, 30 seconds after the show has ended. So if you select all these files, so just hold down my shift key. One of the great little hidden gems is you could actually right click, and then you'll have a function to set the audio folders. So let me just find it real quick. So you get right here, set record folder. So I could actually have a separate record folder so that these files could go onto a portable hard drive, and these files would go onto my audio drive of my system. So this way you can set up two different record paths for the same exact track. So really, paying attention to file management within the audio, because you can have so many different files. But again, kind of going to your pool, under your media, you go to your pool window, and again, the pool is specific for that particular project, and just selecting remove unused media. That will get rid of it, and make sure you save the project right after. Now, some people will use the media bay, and the media bay will be used for every single file that's on your system. So if you wanted to find a video file, a project file from 6 years ago, a particular audio file, a MIDI loop, a track preset, you could find those within the media bay, and that's going to be for your entire system or network, whereas the pool will be specifically for that project. So once again, just click remove unused media, and then you should be good to go. So really careful to pay attention to file management. I've seen many people get stuck, in the middle of an album project, and every audio file is in one folder, and they didn't name the files, etc. So really take the extra time to do that. Okay, if we have any more questions, please feel free to ask. I'll go ahead and show one trick that's really handy in regards to tempo editing. So let's say if we have a project that wasn't recorded to a click track, and many live bands and live musicians may not actually want to record to a click track. And again, if you have other topics you want covered, please feel free to kind of type them in the comments area, or if there's something I didn't cover well enough in the topics we went over, just that you want me to go over again or reiterate, just let me know. All right, so let's say we have a project here, a live ensemble, and we'll just listen to it here.
Turning Japanese, I think. 1, 2.
And we listen to the click track.
4.
Let's say we solo the mandolin. The performance really has nothing to do time-wise with the click track. So often when you get into this situation, people will want you to do particular editing of functions so that as if you had a bar beat correlation between the musical performance and the grid. So here there's no correlation between a grid. So what a lot of people do is use absolute time. So if you right click up here, you can see your time in seconds, and you don't necessarily see it in bar and beats. So what I could do here is the mandolin is actually kind of throughout this entire song here. And what I could do is I'm going to have Cubase automatically tell me what the tempo of the audio file is. So I'm going to go to my project menu and just selecting just that file there, I'm going to go to tempo detection. And then I want to analyze the musical performance. And what it's going to do, it's going to take my absolute time value here. It's going to convert it to bars and beats, gives me a warning message. And it does an analysis of my mandolin track and has given me a tempo track. So we can see that the tempo is fluctuating here on almost every single beat. So if I solo the mandolin, so this automatically adds a time signature track as well as a tempo track for our audio. So let's say if I want to, now since it's figuring out what the beat it is, it actually gives us our time signature in 1/4. So if I want to come here, and let's go ahead and I think we have a count in for the singer here.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
So if I wanted to, I could come right here, and then I'm just going to select my drawing tool. And let me just find that point again.
2, 1, 2.
And then I'm going to just turn my snap on, so it's going to snap right to the beat here.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
All right, and then what I want to do is we'll just find that. Let me just find a downbeat here.
3, 4.
All right, so right at this point, what I want to do is put in my 4/4 time signature.
4.
So now if I wanted to add MIDI data or edit the audio and have it correlate to the musical grid, we could do that quite easily. But let's say if I wanted their performance to actually be more rhythmically steady. So what I could do is I'm going to select all of the audio files from here, go to my audio menu, and let's go to advanced, and what I want to do is set definition from tempo. So what I want to do is what we have in a lot of programs that do time stretching, real-time time stretching, is the ability of dealing with tempo or audio files that have one particular tempo or one steady tempo. But if it has multiple tempos, as we see here, what I could actually do is I could apply all of these tempo changes that occur on every single beat, and I could actually apply that metadata to the project, or I could actually embed it as additional metadata within the audio files. So what I want to do now is click OK, and what it's done is we see this little musical quarter note here up here in the upper right hand corner. And now as I wanted to come here, let's say our tempo starts off about 140 beats a minute. I can now just choose to type in a new tempo. So if I put my tempo into fixed mode, I could say, okay, let's make it 126 beats a minute. If I wanted to be 156 beats a minute, or 108 beats a minute. So now as we do this, I can now also select a range of tempos if I activate my tempo track, and I could just speed them up. or if I wanted to actually just kind of draw in new tempo changes, I could just come here. So very, very powerful way of being able to take performances that weren't recorded to a traditional click track and be able to work with them and edit them as if they were, or be able to take a performance that's fluctuating in tempo and be able to have that more regular and kind of a little more steady if desired. So really, really handy things again. So once again, that hidden function, or the one it's not so obvious, it's not necessarily hidden. If we go to the advanced menu and choose set definition from tempo. All right, so I see I'm kind of watching the video on another screen. I see it's a couple minutes behind. I'll go through and see if we have any more questions here. All right, so we have some more questions about fading out MIDI notes. Okay, and then, yeah, I think Very Audio is very good as well. One of the comments. I don't like using the third-party tools. All right, so we had a question on from Sir Robert from Atlanta about setting up video, okay, for a film score project. We'll do that. But first from Greg, we'll do a quick how to fade out on a MIDI note. So let me open up a quick MIDI project here. Let me see. I think I have some. All right, so let's say if we have a MIDI note that we want to do a fade out on. So a question from Greg. Okay, good to see. I see a comment from Bob Bullock. It's good to see him online. All right, so fading out a MIDI note. So there's a couple different ways of doing it. MIDI itself will have a couple of what are called MIDI continuous controllers. So a lot of people, like if we have a note here, you know, we see often the MIDI controller that is the default controller is going to be velocity. And what the velocity is basically how loud that key was pressed down. Now you could actually see the color coordination there. So if you have a blue note, that means that the velocity is lower if you listen to it. You could often hear kind of the sound of the instrument change depending upon the velocity of it. So some people think of velocity as a volume. So velocity, a higher velocity often equates to a higher volume. But one of the ways that you could, but it doesn't actually affect the volume. So if we come here, we could actually go to your main volume controller. So if I wanted to go to my main volume, and this is a continuous controller, and it's a continuous controller 7 within the MIDI specification. Now I could just kind of come here and draw in a fade out. Now there's also some specialized tools for doing a fade out as well. So if I come to my drawing tool right over here, we could also just come right here, and if we wanted to, let's say, go to my paint tool, we could have different shapes of drawing. So if I wanted a straight linear fade out, like starting at that point, I could do that. Or if you wanted to have more of a parabola, or different shapes. So if you want to do sine waves, etc. So, and then if you find that like one of the drawing tools is going the wrong way, you could just invert it like that. So that's one way of kind of doing, and that's kind of maybe the older way of doing this. Now, one of the limitations was if we had a part that had a chord. Let me see. I think if we open up this note here, this part, and these notes were playing at the same time, I could go to my controller 7 here to main volume, and I could draw that in. But this will affect every single note that's on that particular MIDI channel. So one of the things that we have enabled to do is to actually, within what we call VST note expression, is the ability to, if I wanted to, with the VST, with any MIDI instrument for a single voice, such as my bass line, I could come here and double click on the note, and then if we select the note expression in the left hand side, I can now adjust volume, pan, tuning, tone, color, emphasis, and this could vary depending upon the instrument. But what I could do now is just draw in my volume change on that particular note. And you could actually see this reflected directly here. So that's called note expression. And if you don't see these little curves on the notes, you could actually come right over here and make sure that show note expression data is turned on. So any MIDI instrument allows you to work this way. Now, as you're kind of working, one of the things that you'll run into is if you're working with a chord, part of the MIDI specification, one of the limitations of it, and remember it was set up in 1982, is that when you have a chord, the volume will control everything that's on that MIDI channel. But with VST 3.5 instruments like the Hallian Sonic SE that's included with Cubase, or Hallian Sonic, Pad Shop, or the full Hallian sampler, with VST 3.5, we could actually just double click, and I could have this note fade in if I wanted to. Or let's say, okay, I'll select my volume here at that point, and I want this note to fade out. So this way I could have kind of polyphonic MIDI controllers on a particular event. So if I wanted to have, let's say, a pitch bend on this note, or panning on this note be independent of panning on a different note, I could just do this. And VST 3.5 instruments is the only way that you could do this. Now, one other tip when working with controllers is many people want to see multiple controllers simultaneously. So they look here and they say, oh, I could only see velocity, or I could only see my aftertouch, or pitch bend, program change, or my main volume. But if you actually go to the lower left hand corner, you could actually click right here, and then you could choose different controllers. So I could say I want to see velocity, and I want to add another controller lane, and I want this to be modulation. And we could just kind of draw in some mod wheel data, and I could resize each of the lanes here if you want. So this way I could see multiple MIDI controllers, and if I really like that particular view, if I click here, we could actually save it as a preset. So I can add a preset, and we'll call this Google Hangout. So now if I have my preset where I only see velocity, I can now just one mouse click, say, boom, I could see all of those controllers. So there's many different ways, but using kind of the note expression is really fast because all you have to do is make sure you have volume selected here, double click on the note, and then you'll go to town and be able to edit that data on particular notes right there. All right, so let's take a look at some other questions. All right, so we had a couple questions, let's see, about doing some film scoring stuff. Let me just kind of go back and review some questions. We've had a bunch come in. So we had a question about seamless and zipper noise-free fade out of MIDI tracks. Generally, if you do hear any zippering or noise, it's kind of more a function of that particular instrument. By default, MIDI shouldn't do that, but depending upon how the MIDI or the sound was programmed. All right, so let's talk about, let me just kind of jump back real quick. I think Sir Robert had a question about audio to start a film score project. Okay, so let's do a quick thing on working with video. So let me just open up a quick project. Has some video files. Let's see the one I'm looking for here. All right, so we have a dedicated video track inside of Cubase. So if we come here, we can add track, and then you'll see video track. Now, once you have a video track, you'll see thumbnails. Now, the best format that you probably want to use is going to be QuickTime. So QuickTime is kind of what the engine is really based around. Now, you can open up your device window here to where you could actually see, if you go to your devices menu, and then you have a video player. So once you come here, we can now just go directly and open your video player. So as I come here and move my cursor in the timeline, I could actually see the video. And if I zoom in here on my particular file, you could actually kind of see at the frame level right there. Now, one of the things that people run into when working with video is going to be setting up like different tempo changes for different scenes. Often the video editor may not be kind enough to give you enough time, to, as you're doing your video edits, to make sure that all the bars and beats will work out for the music part. So now one of the tricks that I like to do is to have the divide track list function. So you notice that as I kind of scroll up and down in this project, that I could have my video window and like my marker track always resident on top. And how you could set that up is there's a little function here. It's very well hidden, or it's a subtle feature to make sure you're paying attention, called divide track list. So if you kind of go to the upper right hand corner of the project window here, you'll see this little icon for divide track list. So as soon as I turn this on, so now my video window is probably at the top or maybe the bottom. But if you click again right there, you could have the video track and marker track in the upper window. Now, something that's really handy is you could, if you wanted to move a particular track, so let's say if I wanted to come to here and I want this track, I believe if I just kind of right click here, then you could just toggle this status to move it up. Let me see if I can find where it's at. I may have a quick brain cramp on this. But this way you could actually choose to, I'm trying to remember where the function is. But anyway, but usually by default, you'll have the video track updated there. Now, let's say we wanted to do, let's say this is our in part of our video cue. All right, so I'm going to drop a marker just by hitting the insert key. But the markers we can also add just by, if you come right over here, you could open up the marker window, and then you could just drop your markers here. So if you wanted to insert a marker, and let's say I needed to go right here as my out part. So I'm going to drop another marker there. Now, one of the great things that you could do is, when we actually want to work make these 2 points in the video musically timed, something that's really handy is what's called the time warp tool. So what this is going to allow you to do is I could actually move, I could say I want an even number of measures between those. So all I have to do now is come here, and then if you hold down, you could set the first locator right here. So I say, okay, I want measure 15 to be right at the beginning of that marker. And let's say I want 3 or 4 measures. I can now come right over here, and I can move measure 18 to fall right there. And as I do that, that will automatically insert the tempo changes. So I could take 2 abstract points of the video, and instead of worrying about having a 7/8 measure thrown in just to make it fit, I could come here and choose, okay, I want measure 15 to start right there, and I want measure 18 to start right at a different point in time. You could actually pick and choose and move those events kind of based on the actual video cues right here, and it's really easy to kind of navigate those from your markers. So that way you could have an even number of measures right there. Now, once you have this, you could also have the tempo changes and have everything automatically correlate within your music notation as well. So this way you could have all the tempo changes perfectly synchronized directly to the picture cue. And we have a lot of people that always assume, I could do so much in Cubase and it's more of an audio and MIDI program. But you could do a tremendous amount of notation capability as well. So some of the things that can really make a difference if you're trying to take what was kind of performed in and what was played in and have that translate into musical notation very easily is a function called the appearance quantization. So we'll just go to this project here, and I'm just going to revert this. And we probably all, if you have played around with different notation programs, realize that kind of playing in parts could often be very difficult to actually make it look musical. So if I have a MIDI part here, let's say I turn on my click. And we have like typical musical articulations, and maybe it's a particular feel. When we go into our notation, often it could look like something pretty horrible like this. So when we want to go into notation, one of the things you can do is actually double click and just to the left here, and this will open up your score settings page. And one of the things that you want to do is to first define a key. So say, okay, in this song I'm in a key of A flat, and I want to do a split staff, and let's say I want to do an appearance quantization where the smallest notes that I intended to play were 16th notes, and the smallest rest I intended were 8th note rest. And we also have some interpretation options here. So let's say maybe I was swinging a little bit in the performance. And now in just a matter of a couple seconds, of which I could save this as a preset, I can now apply that, and I could have very legible music notation laid out for me right there. So very, very easy to kind of take, parts that you played. And again, if you've done the time warp tool to synchronize between different in and out points of the video, you could just easily have tempo changes and still have a musical score that would be able to print out. We'll take a look at some other quick questions that have kind of come in. I'm kind of monitoring this on another computer. We're getting a couple minutes behind now, it looks like. So we'll kind of keep going. We go through some more questions. Sorry for hitting my headphones in the microphone. So there's a question about the tempo correction. If you could adapt all the art tracks to the mandolin. So yeah, you could definitely do that. So play around with that. Okay, so it's comments on the volume automation. So channel fader with the master fader. Okay. Okay, so let's take a look. So we had a question on track coloring. One of the ways you could do, there's kind of two different track colors. Unfortunately, I haven't found a way to select these tracks here. So one of the things that you could do is to come here and set these track colors here. So I was, I keep playing around with every new version that comes out, and I haven't found a way to set all of those simultaneously. And one of the cool things with this is this will automatically show up in the mixer as well. So if I select this track and choose my track colors and go down, etc., I can just kind of set my track colors accordingly. Now, if I have the events, now when we go into the mixer, why some people like this is now that we're in the mixer, we can scroll over and I could see those colors carried over into the mixer. But you could have kind of a second level of colors here. So if I want to select events and then use my color tool, I could actually now just kind of select those events there, and then they would all change accordingly. There might be a way to kind of do it to carry these colors over to the tracks. I don't know. I could do some more kind of research on it. But if you just kind of select the colors here with the color tool and then select your colors, you could do it at least on the project window level. But not here, not a way that I found. There might be some way. I don't know. I haven't found it yet. All right, so let's go through some more of the questions here. All right, so we had a question on quick controls. Okay, so quick controls have gotten a bit more powerful in Cubase 7.5. So let me just open up a quick project here. Okay, so using quick controls allow you to very easily set up kind of like 8 go-to parameters, and these could be like really handy for working with soft synths. So if I wanted to come here, and there's been some enhancements in Cubase 7.5 with this. So if I want to add an instrument track, I could come right over here. Let's say we add a Halion Sonic SE. Now, as we've done this, there's now been a consolidation of using, instrument tracks and instrument racks, which wasn't handled as elegantly before. So if I go to my VST instrument rack here, I could actually see that I could have instrument track instruments and rack instruments. Now, one of the problems previously was if you started off with an instrument track, you could be limited to stereo outputs only and to not having multi-timbral capabilities, not being able to address more than a single MIDI channel on an instrument track. So a couple of things with quick controls has made this a little easier. And one of the things that we can do now is once you have an instrument track here, we can see our track instruments, or you could add a rack instrument here. So if you wanted to add, let's say, a pad shop, you could do that right there. So now as you wanted to work with the instrument track here, what I could do, one of the limitations was before, if we had 16 stereo outs capable within the instrument, I could come right over here and I could only have a stereo output, but now I could activate all of the multiple outputs within the instrument. Also, if I load up a different sound here, I can now, if I have my Halion Sonic SE, my instrument track selected, and I right click and I add, let's say 15 MIDI tracks. I can now come over here, and you'll notice that we have the Halion Sonic on MIDI channel 1. This will automatically be routed to the same instrument with Halion Sonic SE on MIDI channel 2, the next track on MIDI channel 3. So they're automatically added as we go along. So if I wanted to add a couple of other sounds here, I could now just take this and say I want to add a keyboard sound on MIDI channel 3, and let's say a brass sound on channel 4. Each of these instruments, as we see them here, can have different quick controls, and these are your kind of quick, often your most like commonly grabbed for parameters. Now you could also just kind of come over here and set these up to work with, particular if you wanted to switch to quick control, so you could customize those. Now something that's really handy with the virtual instruments is you have the ability, if you click here, to hide or make the quick controls visible within the rack itself. So as you do this, what's really handy is as I go to my first instrument, I could actually see the quick control assignments for that instrument. I go to my choir sound. The quick controls have automatically changed to the selected track automatically. Now, quick controls are not only used for virtual instruments, but we can use them for audio tracks as well. So a real obvious one might be to have 8 quick controls set up for my sends, or for my 8 sends. So if I go to my quick controls here, one of the new features that's been added is, and we could have 8 quick controls set up before, but one of the problems was, you might want to have multiple sets of 8 quick controls. So here I could actually have presets. So I could say, okay, I want to have my volume, my pan left, right, my different filters, or if I want to see all of my sends, or if I wanted to come here, my EQs, bands 2 and 3. But you could actually come right over here, and now you could actually rename the preset or create your own presets. So you could actually make your own quick control presets, so you could actually have those pop up very quickly. Now, one of the other great things that quick controls are really handy for is you could use a number of different MIDI controllers, or we even have a CMC QC, which is the quick control knob, or using our CC121. If you go to your device setup, you could actually come over here and you could see your VST quick controls, and you could have different remote controllers control them very easily. So some of the new things with 7.5 is the ability of quick control presets, as well as the ability of being able to see these quick controls and have them dynamically reflect all of your different channels within your mixer as well for your virtual instrument. Excuse me, for your virtual instruments. All right, so let's take a look. See if some more questions have come in. All right, so we'll see some more questions come in. I'm kind of watching the monitor here. We're at about maybe about 10 minutes behind here. So I'm just going to kind of hang out. So if people are kind of watching this afterwards, we might have a little bit of a pause time here. So you might want to fast forward, but we'll see if there's more questions that are coming in. I'm going to go back and review some of our questions that have happened and see, make sure I got them covered. Just reviewing the questions that have come in here. Just one more point on a question about the seamless fade out of MIDI tracks. One of the areas, like we had talked about before, would be, if we have a Hallian Sonic, or let's say just a MIDI track and we have some notes, is once we go into our note expression here, one of the things also, just to reiterate this point, so a lot of MIDI devices only have a resolution of 127 values. So one of the things that could be a little problematic for people is that, you can sometimes hear that resolution. Some people it doesn't bother, but one of the areas with the VST note expression, when we draw in note expression like this, is it goes well beyond. With the VST 3.5 instruments, we're not really bound by the traditional 128 stages of values that were written in the original MIDI specification. So we can go beyond that to have a much finer control and resolution for your MIDI devices. All right, we'll see if there's more questions. For those watching afterwards, there's going to be there's a delay that's been built up. So what people are seeing versus where I'm at now. So we're going to kind of let that catch up a little bit and see if there's more questions that come in. We'll just kind of watch it as we go on. Okay, so quick question on turning all plugins totally off. Let me just open up a quick project here. It's one I will take a quick look at. So let's go to let's open up this project here. And I'll revert this. Okay, so when we come over here to, you mentioned about bypassing the inserts in the mix console. So if I wanted to come here, I could bypass from within the mixer. So those, if you have a lot of different inserts and send effects within the mix console, you can come right over here, and if you wanted to be able to bypass all those, you could click on the I for the inserts, as well as the E would bypass the EQs. So if I just come here, click on Alt, with that I could bypass the EQs and the sends. There might be a way. Let me just take a quick look within the project logical editor. There might be, let's say, to see if there's a way with to no, I don't see a way within the project logical editor. So the best way I know of doing it is from within the mixer itself. So if you wanted to come over here, going to the mix console and just clicking on the Alt or Option key on Mac probably, and that will do your channel strip, your sends, kind of all the same way. So that's the best way I know of doing it. All right, let me see if I've missed any more. Questions? All right, so we'll kind of let the we're just kind of letting the video catch up here. For those of you that are kind of watching the video offline afterwards, we built up quite a buffer. So we're just going to kind of let the buffer kind of catch up here and see if other people will ask questions as we go along. All right, so we're still kind of waiting for a buffer, see if there's any more questions that come in. All right, still waiting for buffer to catch up here. And please, if you have any other questions, we'll try to wrap up a little bit after 9 Eastern time. All right, we're still waiting for the buffer to catch up. Still waiting for the buffer to catch up for people viewing it, see if we have more questions or topics. Still waiting for the buffer to catch up. We'll see if there's more questions. And we'll answer a couple more questions and then wrap up. All right, we're still waiting for the buffer. Still waiting. Still waiting for the buffer to catch up. All right, so we had a couple more questions just kind of roll in. Sorry, there's kind of a long delay here. I just had a couple more. So we had a question on editing the shape of the parabola curve. So let's open up a MIDI part. And so let's say I select my parabola here. So let's say now if I want to come here, I could just draw that in by default. So let me just select a continuous controller. All right, so now I want to select my parabola. So you can see that as you kind of curve it like this, so if you want to change the shape there, or if you hit the control key, you could just kind of change the shape of the parabola like that. And if you're doing some of the other tools, you have your sine wave tool here. So let's say if I do this and I have my sine wave, if you hold down the shift key, you could change the frequency of that, and you can kind of do the same. So so if we have the parabola again, we'll come right over here, and also the shift key on the parabola can just kind of change the parabola curve just like that. So you have modifier keys. So if you want to change the arc of it, the control, or just really the shape, use the shift key. So a question about VSTIs not saving all the output names when save a preset. I think that might be with the actual plugin itself, so you might want to check with Superior Drummer. Let's see, we had another question about pickup notes in the beginning of a recording. One of the things that you can always have active during the tracking process, and there's a preference for it, I believe, if we come over here, it might be under transport. Is that there's a kind of a pre-record mode. So let me just find the setting here, probably under record audio. So you can always have the pre-record set in seconds. So even if you if someone missed an actual recording, what you're able to do at that point is to actually, you could just have kind of this buffer set. So if you wanted to set it for like 2 seconds, you could just come here, and then before you even hit record, any of the audio that's being buffered, that's being kind of sent into the audio device when you record, you could then just basically kind of roll back the beginning of that file. I don't have a microphone connected into my interface because it's being used for the Google Hangout. But at that point, you could actually have the pre-record set up so that, and there's also, let me just find their keyboard shortcut that you can automatically have set up for it. I'm just kind of blanking on the name, but let me just... it's called retrospective record. So that's the name of the function. So there is a retrospective record. So if you wanted to come over here, you could just, if you go not to your preferences, but to your key commands, we can now just go to retrospective. And then, so as you record the audio in, you could just hit shift plus the number asterisk key. So if you wanted to come here, let's say I'll just record some blank audio here, and let's just check, make sure I have my input. So and now if I come here, I'm gonna hit shift plus asterisk, and then so if I just have that set up. So investigate the retrospective record. I don't really have a source connected to it. Let's go through a couple other last minute questions. Joe had asked about creating a macro. So if I wanted to come here, and we kind of went over this a little bit earlier, so if you want to refer back into the video, but we'll just touch on it again. So if you go to your key commands area, you could see show macros. And at this point, you could just, what you want to do is to add, just click on create new macro. You could give it a name. And then if you want, you could now just come over here and just choose your different functions. So let's say I wanted to go to left locator. Then click on add command, and then let's say I want to go to record. Let's say retrospective record. All right, add command, and then you could just continue to add functions there, and then you could actually just trigger that macro again from your edit menu, and you'll see macros appear at the bottom once you have those enabled. All right, it's about 2 hours and 10 minutes into it. I know it's a little bit buffered, so it's just kind of catching up there, but I need to get back and spend some time with my family. But I want to appreciate you guys. I appreciate you guys all coming out for the Google Hangout. I think we'll be doing the next one either April 1st or 2nd. If you subscribe to the YouTube channel here, I believe you'll get notified automatically, and we'll be including it on our email blast. And if you want to just let people know, you could check out some of the other videos on the Club Cubase YouTube channel or the Steinberg software YouTube channel. So there's a lot of great resources here where you can watch that. I know it's quite a bit behind, but I just want to thank you guys for coming out and participating, and let your friends know if you like this format. If there's more things you wanted to do, just let us know. We want to make it easier for you guys to learn and get the most out of your Steinberg products. Thank you very much. Have a great night, and thanks for participating. Goodbye.